Welcome to Wearing History. Today we're going to go over how to fit the bra top and add shoulder straps to the 1950s Laguna Beach set. This is the pattern based on an original from the 1950s. In this pattern, the bust does run very large. The first thing we're going to do is make it as if we were making our final version. This is for my mock-up. So you're going to be matching the small dots up to the larger dots for your tucks and pinning that to place on both sides of the bra front. After this, you're going to stay stitch both of those sides to hold those pleats in place. The seam allowance on this pattern is 1/2 of an inch. Now on your backs, you want to have your center backs marked. That's the line there. I also marked my buttonholes. You're going to lay your right sides together and you're going to stitch the seam with your 1/2 inch seam allowance. I pin the top first and then the bottom, and then I ease in the middle where the pleats are. It's okay if you need to adjust your pleats a little bit to fit. Do the same for both sides. If we were making a real fabric version, we'd be doing two versions of this. One would be the lining and the other would be the outside of the fabric. I am marking my center front now. I'm just using that, and I've got this little scrap of fabric. It's actually the salvage of the muslin, and I'm going to pretend this is the tie so I can get an idea of what the fit will be like with the tie. Now I'm going to take it to my form. You could do this on yourself, but it's best if you have a friend to help you. So let's pretend that this is me fitting a friend. Obviously I can't pin into my friend. But you can see the overlap there is really large. So the top of this pattern does run big. I have not changed it from the period source material at all, because this is kind of like a historical accuracy thing, I guess. I wanted to retain the original pattern for future people who wanted to sew it. So I'm going to be pinning this to my dress form. If you're fitting this on a friend, they can wear a tank top, and you can pin to the tank top. Now I'm going to undo the front tie so I can get an idea of how large the fit is there. So I'm marking the center fronts. I'm going to pin this to place on my dress form, or you could pin it to a tank top on a person you're fitting it for. Now you can see how much there is here in the front. I matched my side seam exactly where it's supposed to be on the dress form and pinned that to place because I don't want to mess at all with those tucks on the side, because that's just going to make things really wonky. So instead, I'm going to be taking out the extra of the center of the pieces. You see here I'm pinning out the back. It's not at all unusual to have to change the shape of these pieces because every person carries themselves so differently, both in terms of bust and the shape of their back, that really expect some of these changes if you decide to make any type of crop top pattern. Since this one is essentially two pieces, a front and a back, with no center front bust seam, you have to be really simplistic in what you do for your alterations. So in this instance, I've pinned out the extra. Now I'm tying it with a tie, and I'm checking the fit, and it looks pretty good. If this was a person, you could also change from one side to the other. Like if they have one side of their bust is larger than the other, you can do all of this in your mock-up. Now, since I know that this is going to have a problem for me for gravity, I'm playing now with an extra ribbon I had to see if I like a necktie idea. And it's okay, I mean, it's fine, but for me, I think I'm going to actually need to go with shoulder straps. If you have a smaller bust, this pattern is a good fit. If you have a larger bust, expect to have to make some darts or some changes. You can add princess seams, which are right down the bust line. You can add a center front seam. Do whatever you need to do in order to make the pattern fit you. So now I'm checking the shoulder straps, and I think that's a great idea for me. Now I'm going to try and turn my alterations onto my pattern piece itself. So for this, I am marking with a Sharpie pen where my pins are. Then I'm going to untie the front, and I'm also going to mark the front of the bodice. I'm marking that in Sharpie here on both sides of the pin, and that will show me how much extra has been pinned out. So when I take open then it looks like this. And I can tell that I have a little bit extra that I pinned on one side versus the other. But to keep the alterations simple, I'm going to just draw a straight line from the top to the bottom. Now I am just marking it on my pattern piece. I'm marking center front, matching center front of the pattern piece and the fabric. And then I'm drawing the lines at top and bottom, and then I'm going to connect those with my ruler. Now I'm going to fold them together and then tape it to place. My child has stolen my tape, so I'm not taping it in the studio. But I did find it later, and it did get taped. Now I'm doing the back. You're going to match the back edges together. And you can see it almost is like a dart shape there. So I'm just going to take my ruler and connect the dots. And I'm going to mark my little marks at the top and the bottom of the piece. I'm going to draw this with my clear ruler. And then I'm going to fold it on those lines. And I'm going to tape my pattern piece together, which gets rid of that fullness. You could make another mock-up now if you needed to. Here I am grading out those lines to show myself that, hey, these need to be fixed when you cut your fabric. All right, now I'm going to make my shoulder straps. For mine, I cut 2 inches wide of fabric, and since my fabric is lightweight, I have used fusible interfacing. I then stitched it with 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm using my loop turner now, grabbing it and pulling it right side out, and then I press it. Now, if I had measured in the mock-up phase, I could just cut the straps to that length plus seam allowance, but I forgot to do that. So now I'm going back to my dress form and I'm pinning it on. I know that I tend to have shorter waist, which means that usually straps are too long for me. So I'm kind of ignoring the arm's eye of my dress form and making it higher because I know that's about where my bust hits. I'm leaving about 1 inch seam allowance on both sides because I need to be able to stitch these to place and then turn under the raw edges on the inside. So I'm checking it now, and I'm making sure the fronts look like they're the same height, and the backs look about parallel, and then I'm going to pin that to place also and snip off the extra ends. Now when I stitch this to place, I am going to be taking this and I moved it to the inside, keeping in mind how much seam allowance I had, and I'm going to stitch that by machine on my top stitching and then turn under and whip by hand the extra to just the facing piece or just the lining piece so it's not visible from the outside. And before you do this, make sure you try it on. I'm checking it here and it looks like my straps aren't going to slip. And this is what it looks like when I had it all stitched together. So then you just do your buttons and buttonholes and you are good to go. You're ready for the beach or the pool or a nice summer day. Thanks so much for watching. You can get patterns on Wearing History on Etsy, also wearinghistorypatterns.com. This is the 1950s Laguna Beach set.